Welcome back to Legacy Wealth 1322. On this channel, I teach regenerative operators how to become way more profitable, but only when you do it wholly aligned with God's will. Well, on this episode, it's episode number 3 of a 7-part series that I've titled The ABCs of Controlling Your Operations Capital. And this particular episode is going to be focused on the fact that you want to have capital in motion to end up with the best results. I'm going to give you a couple of different examples so you can let this kind of make a whole lot of sense. Because in a real world, practical sense, if you got water that's sitting in a pond and the thing it's going to do better than anything else is, grow mosquitoes. Well, that's obviously not a desirable end result. And that's why you want to have that water in motion, because it can literally bring life and living to livestock and land and crops and so forth. And that's a good thing. The other thing I want to drive home here is that this is absolutely not the place where you want to be focused on getting returns on your money. That's a whole different function, and it's a different place that we'll be talking about. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that if you got $50,000 worth of capital and you get that invested, so it's chasing a return, and you get 12% on your money, how much usable capital is that going to produce for you? Well, that's $6,000. $50,000 at 12% is going to give you $6,000 of usable capital. Now, here's a question you don't want to forget in that process, because ask yourself this question: how much risk do you have to accept, be willing to take, in order to get a 12% return on your capital to get that $6,000 result? Well, one of the things you need to understand clearly is that in investments, the interest rate that you get, the return you get on that money, is a good indication how much risk you have to assume in order to not lose your money. So 12% returns mean there's a lot higher risk of losing your money, because think about it this way: if you got $500,000 of capital and you only have a 4% return, then that's a place where you can get $20,000 worth of usable capital out of that situation. Okay, now think about that. Where do you have access to more usable capital? $12,000, in an investment where you've only got $50,000 invested, and you get a 6% or $6,000 result versus a $500,000 amount of capital invested at only 4%, produces usable capital of $20,000. Big difference. Okay. And here, the only thing we're focusing on is basically 3 things. Number one, the ownership. You want to be the owner of that capital, so you don't have to ask anybody's permission to be able to use it. The next thing is access. You do not want to be in the position of having to go through a qualification process and bare your financial soul and essentially pledge as collateral your entire livelihood. Think about that. Your entire livelihood is on the line in some of these loan situations where if you mess up in any way, you can put yourself in a big time world of hurt in a big time hurry. Well, that's not a good position to be in. So the other thing, the third piece of that, is not only the access, but the control of that money, where you don't have to put up control. You don't have to pay fees to get access to some money. You don't have to give tax returns and all this kind of delayed and nonsense and stuff. Because if you need that money, you own it, you got control of it, then if an opportunity comes along or a need comes up, you can address it right then and there, okay? Well, that's the things that you want to be in a position to be doing. I want to go a little bit deeper on this investment chasing returns kind of situation, because here's the deal. Don't forget this. This is big time important. If you get a 12% return, ask yourself a simple question: how much risk do you have to assume and be willing to accept to get a 12% return? The whole thing is that in the real world terms, the rate of return you get on an investment is a very good indication. It's an indicator of how much risk you're having to assume in order to get that return and not lose your money. Is that the position you really wanted to be in? Because the usable capital turns out to be $20,000 with a $500,000 amount of capital invested at only 4% versus $6,000 with $50,000 worth of capital invested at 12%. See, that this is not the place where you want to be focused on the returns. You're looking for the ownership of the money, the access to it, and the control of it. So now if you want to go deeper on this particular subject, go to the show notes and request a copy of my ebook, Regenerative Operator, Can You Be Trusted with Biblical Wealth? Because I'm going to go into a lot of detail, and that's going to all lead up to go into absolute total detail on how you can turn this banking alternative into a profit center that we haven't even talked about really, where most operators I've ever run across are very, very focused on wanting to be able to pass on their operation to the next generation. Well, that is in absolute alignment with God's will in Proverbs 13:22, which is where this YouTube channel comes up with its name. So if you want to go deeper on this stuff, just go to the show notes and request that copy of that book, because in that book on pages 100 to 105, I've got 3 illustrations of how you can use this banking alternative situation and turn money into an absolute windfall legitimately, because you can turn the banking alternative into a situation where one generation passes on the money to the next generation, because it's just crazy to have to start from ground zero with every generation, or worse, come into it deep in the hole of debt. So, pages 100 to 105 have illustrations that shows how you can get massive amounts of capital, millions of dollars in cash, income tax free, and for literally pennies on the dollar. That's what's waiting for you. So be sure and get your copy of that book, Regenerative Operator, Can You Be Trusted with Biblical Wealth? Until next time, you be blessed.